Hi, my name is Stephen Upton. I'm the chair of Touch New Zealand, and during the day I'm co-founder, director and chief operating officer of Kernel Wealth, an investment platform, and KiwiSaver manager. And today we're going to talk about recruiting skilled directors in not-for-profits.
Hi, I'm Banicevich. Welcome to Governancebites. As you just heard, I have the pleasure again to spend time with Stephen Upton. Stephen, thank you very much again for your time.
Welcome, Mark.
This is a really interesting topic. Having, my introduction to governance was through a not-for-profit, and the challenge of not just identifying the gaps in your skill set in the board, but in particular recruiting them. In my case, a bit of a minority sport or a minority type organisation, as opposed to something that's as well known as Touch New Zealand, which can have a little bit more drawing power. So, really interesting discussion about how we can find and recruit the right people. But I am going to open with the same question I opened last time we caught up, because maybe in a while since people have seen that, or some people may not have seen that video. And it's relevant to this conversation. What are the key skills and competencies that you think a not-for-profit board needs to have around the table?
Yeah, I think it's that the members, they need to be good at listening. They need to be good at constructively debating topics. That they need to have integrity and be willing to, do the right thing, and to share. It is the collective voice, it is that benefit of the diversity that you're looking for. But, maybe the one thing that we missed last time was time, because it's time for the meetings, it's time for the preparation, and often, especially not-for-profits, those board members can be on plenty of other, maybe at different levels of the sport or the arts that they're involved in. And that board together time's so precious.
Yes. That
if people are underprepared, then everything must be taken as read. That's the point, because often you're not doing whole day meetings. You can't waste time in the meeting going through the background material. You've got to take that as you've got to devote your time to the discussions. Yeah. So if it's more than a recap or the exec summary, here's a paper. It's talking about a recommendation for this. What does everybody think? And the chair can then facilitate discussion around that topic. Then it's useful, because even you're usually talking an evening, sometimes a whole day, but you're not talking weekends or week-long chances to talk about things. So you've got to be effective with the use of time. So it's making sure you don't waste time, because you've got the time to prepare and the time to contribute to that organisation. That's, I think, one of the key skills. The hard skills, they'll vary by the organisation, what the organisation needs, the size of the organisation, the diversity of skills required.
Any hard skills you would expect to see on every board? Particularly when you get to a kind of a regional or national level. Yeah,
look, definitely somebody good with numbers. Ultimately holding to account is a big part of it, overseeing the activities. And so, where does the money go? Having somebody that can really, every director should be able to read a balance sheet, should be able to read a P&L statement, should be able to understand cash flow. But that would be the number one skill. Then some understanding of the legal environment. So it doesn't mean they're a lawyer, that might mean they've had some exposure to the law.
Particularly around things like health and safety as well in the sports context.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, depends on the level of responsibility, health and safety and employment. Do you have employees? Code reviews, concerns about safety, well-being, integrity codes, that child protection issues, member protection issues more broadly. These all do come in, but often these are skills that don't necessarily need to sit around the board table. It's just the concept of what those things mean. Would be important. And obviously, if you're talking about something that's in the community dealing with the disadvantaged, Touch runs a number of activities. We need to have people who are well skilled in that, as against something which it's the club running the junior program, in some town doesn't have those sort of same challenges, or it's the woodwork club or the bowls club. You don't have those sort of requirements as much. It's more network that actually becomes more important there.
And then, as you say, there'll be other skills that'll be tied to the strategy. So if there's a need to redevelop information technology or membership databases, then you might need somebody with that skill set. If there's a desire to grow membership, it might be around marketing, social media, those kinds of things. So those needs may change over time.
And it depends on your strategy. It change over time, and where you're not confusing the roles and experiences and understandings of board members with the skill sets required to execute those things, which really should be within the officers or the employees.
Yes.
So,
Right. How do you identify the skills that you've got on the board and your skill gaps?
So a skills and diversity matrix, they're often talked about. They can be done really well, they can be done really badly. I think that it's the chair, that the CEO, chief executive, a head of an appointments committee if you've got one, maybe a long-standing board member, come together and fill it in, because you need a variety of people. But what variety of what people? How much do different skill sets, business skill sets that you're talking about matter? How much is it understanding of funding environments? How much is it understanding of the constituency? How much is it funding? How much is it high performance? How much is it tikanga? Is one that's sort of coming in more and more to make sure that Te Ao Māori is properly recognised through the board and through the organisation generally. That's become governance. Again, if you get to a certain level, you need people who truly understand good governance, because often at the higher levels you have a implied responsibility to also encourage good governance through the entire
network of organisations.
So
absolutely.
That's what I actually spend quite a bit of time doing. Anyway.
Can you describe a good process for using a skills and diversity matrix? How is that used effectively?
It's gap analysis really. So the way I do it, rightly or wrongly, is basically colour code or short rating 1 to 5.
And directors rate themselves?
No, generally I'd have those people. You'd make it aware. You'd let people know, hey Mark, we think you're a 3 out of 5 on this, or you're a amber, not a green on this. But it should be pretty obvious. You're not trying to assess people. You're trying to agree where people's strengths are and where the weaknesses, the collective weaknesses are of the organisation. So then you can recruit for those collective weaknesses. That's what it's about. So I would generally think it's that the chair, but with support from a few others, is doing that, and doing that annually, either before or after an AGM. To know what you've got and to see how it all fits together. Yeah,
absolutely. And then being prepared for who's about to roll off the board and what skill do you need to replace them, and what skills are you going to lose at that point as well.
Exactly.
Yes. What role does diversity play in identifying your board composition?
Yeah, it's huge. You've got to be careful with what you mean by diversity, because it's not demographic diversity. Well, it's sometimes demographic diversity. I guess it's hopefully not just pale, stale male men. You and I, well done. But that's okay. If we were setting up a men's only woodworking club, then we are the constituency. We are the right people to be on the board. So I guess it's always the thing I come back to, is that you must represent your membership. So touch is across all socioeconomic groups, with a skew actually to the lower. It's very ethnically diverse, very geographically diverse. It's truly 50-50 male and female. So I do consider all of those factors, and sometimes that means the ideal board member I'm looking for is somebody, Pacific Island woman in their 30s who's in a wheelchair. And I know I'm not going to tick all those boxes, and that's silly, but it gives me an idea of what I'm actually wanting to discriminate for. And discrimination in this is interesting. Again, I'm not a lawyer, please somebody don't hold me to this, but you can actually discriminate, as far as I'm aware, in terms of board composition, because this is not employment and this is not membership. You're not telling somebody they can't play the sport or participate, and you're not telling them they can't be an employee, but you are saying, look, I'm looking for a particular skill set.
Yes.
So I need this, and if what I'm lacking right now is we have too many men, I have to get some more women. Then make sure you're making that call. And so yes, diversity, but it's diversity of thought. It's that you want the range of perspectives coming to the table, the range of perspectives of your constituency. And if anything else, if nothing else, to remove tensions and perceptions of inaccessibility. It's like, there's all those old boys up there wearing the blazers, they just make all the decisions for us, but they don't know who we are. That creates an immediate disconnect as to what's happening between the board and the membership. So, you kind of want to, that's not to say that those boys in the blazers have nothing good to say, but it's saying if it's only them, then you're going to not have an accessibility.
Yeah, right, okay. Now, many modern organisations will have a blend of elected directors and appointed directors. So you'll have your AGM, you'll vote for a particular director to come onto the board, and then once all your elected and remaining directors are there, then you'll have a committee that will go out and try and hunt for another appointed director for a skill set. How do you find and attract potential directors that will help you meet those skill and diversity goals? Because many cases with an appointed director, you're trying to go outside your membership, right? You're trying to go outside. How do you attract people?
Yeah, well, it's tough. I mean, I'm not going to say it's easy.
Because the money's not good, right?
The money's not good. Again, was covered in a previous episode. Personally, I think there should be some money involved, an honerarium or some not a. We want your time, but it's at least we don't expect your time for free to give. There's also some transactional element to this, even if it's mostly an intrinsic. I'm interested in what you guys are doing, and that's why I'm going to do it at a discount rate. Look, we've got to appoint better boards, and if you've heard of that website, that's really good for just accessing a network. But often, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's through personal networks.
Yes.
So, and broader personal networks. So it's not your old boys network of another guy to come on for the junket. It's very much finding people that add those missing flavours to the mix.
Through your LinkedIn networks and your business networks.
Exactly. So that I've always found is the best way, especially when you're looking at from outside the sport. But even within the elected, sometimes it's important to do that.
I often think as well, one of the things that is one of the most valuable skills to try and or things to try and develop within an organisation is internal communication.
Yeah.
Because you'll often have a few thousand people that you have access to, and if you can ask those people whether they know anybody with this particular skill set or this particular background, you have way more chance than the 7 people sitting around the board table. Do you know anybody?
Yeah, well, exactly, but also packaging it well. Like, what is this? What do you have to do? What's the commitment here? How does this work? Where are you expected to attend? Often within regional or national sporting events, it's like, there's just an expectation they all turn up to every single event and hand out the medals, or just be there to be, standing on the sidelines so that somebody can have a moan at them. Not necessarily, and often that's a deterrent. Sort of Kiwi, sort of tall poppy, don't poke your head up, and somebody will just want to say, you're the guy I've been looking for. It's like, no, it's more, what's the commitment here, what's the expectation, and like you say, clarity about what we're looking for, why we're looking for that.
Yes. And while a job description will go some way to achieve that, maybe having a video on your website that you can get people to is way more accessible than an
email.
Job description or an email for sure. Now, some organisations, of course, are purely elected directors. Hopefully they'll have a mechanism where there's a couple of directors rolling off and getting replaced each year, but in those cases you're often restricted to who is elected. Is there a way of trying to ensure that or manage the skill set of elected directors and find and attract potential directors that still meet those skill and diversity goals even though they're all elected? Yeah,
it's interesting, and maximum board tenure is an interesting one, and how many, again, like we're discussing previously, yes, there's certain organisations with certain prestige where you might get a large number of nominations and you can have that sort of, rotation. But often actually that rotation counts against you. And that you lose good people because, you've served your maximum term. It's like, well, is there anybody else actually wanting to do this? There's a little bit of that, and then there's also making room for others. So there's a balance. It might be misunderstood, but you've got to shoulder tap them. And it's generally, people don't self-nominate for this type of thing, as I just mentioned, because they don't know what it is for a start. So I think it's the chair's job to call for nominations, and by that I actually do mean call. Like pick up the phone, have a chat to members, have a chat to regional or whatever their network, or across board members. Hey, we need somebody. What networks can we access here? How do we find the right people? Because the biggest challenge is often capacity of, I just don't have time for that. That's all the biggest excuse. I don't have time for that. So, well, what do you think you need time for? Like, how much time are you thinking this is? Because there's a lot of organisations that only, the board only meets 4 times a year, and it's for 2-hour meeting in the evening. So I was like, most people have time for that. So time's not the impediment, but the perception of time, involvement, risk associated, that deters them. So I think it's also that people have the sufficient time and the energy for it as well. So if they hold too many hats, maybe they don't, and you risk just getting the interest waning, because the real interest is at the club level. Yes. But they've been pushed forward to the provincial, regional level, and then they've been pushed forward to the national level, but their passion lies at the club level.
Yeah.
And so how valuable are their insights and their support and their participation at that national level going to be, even if they're pushed forward there because they're an amazing person and they have a great CV and they've achieved a lot in business or in that particular sport. Doesn't necessarily mean that's where their passion lies, or where they can see themselves making some difference or supporting the purpose of the organisation.
Yeah. The other risk that can happen in a purely elected board is you could find yourself on a board of directors for a not-for-profit with a whole bunch of passionate people that are drawn from the membership and don't necessarily have the skills to be there, for the governance skills that the organisation needs, or in particular the spread across them doesn't fill all those gaps. How does a board then try and fill those gaps when a group of people have been elected that don't meet all the needs?
Yeah, I mean, look, ideally the Constitution, if you change your Constitution, consider this, as part of the Incorporated Societies Act changes. Consider co-opted, where the board co-ops on what the board thinks it needs. I always like that as a short-term mechanism, until the next meeting. That allows you to fill the seat while you have a vacancy or while you have a lack of a critical skill set, and a couple of seats. And then more long-term, I'm also in favour of appointed directors. And there's a whole appointments panel thing. There's actually there's some really good research done by AUT around appointments panels and how appointments panels can add value to a board. So I encourage people to look for that if they're interested. But it's then the board can adjust.
Yes.
To what it's getting from its elected. And yes, you do. Everybody will have. Stories, or those involved will have stories about the enthusiastic person, but they're very narrow in their enthusiasm. They're enthusiastic for their particular, sector, sub-passion, topic, whatever, and they kind of ignore the broader, purpose-driven, strategy-driven, holding to account. Aspects, governance role. Yeah.
You mentioned in the first time we caught up actually that under the Incorporated Societies Act 2022, the majority of board members must be members of the organisation. When you're co-opting directors in, are they included in that count?
Yeah, they would be.
They will be.
I mean, right. At the top of my head.
Sorry, throwing you a detailed question.
Ask a lawyer. But it's the majority, and you can, again, it's the idea that you're benefiting the members. So often, your membership should not be exclusionary, and your membership does not necessarily entail participation. A lot of golf clubs and various rugby clubs will have the non-playing membership, the social member, a class of membership where you can vote, but you can't,
you don't tend to participate in the sport itself.
But you're still a member. It's the idea of serving the needs of its members, no matter whether they're actually doing what the intended sport is.
In sports organisations, it's quite a common way to co-op parents, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Members, yeah. When you've mentioned a couple of these already, but you may have some others. What sources do you use when you're recruiting new directors, particularly when you want people external to the organisation? You mentioned appoint better boards.
Yeah, LinkedIn. Very good for understanding what people's skill sets are. How many degrees of separation you are away from them. That's often helpful. Personal network, as I think we covered before.
Yes.
And it's just the same thing. It's being clear as the commitment required, the purpose, the benefit, any remuneration, no matter how small. You see a lot of ads on appoint better boards. Free and must do 10 hours a week. Don't know how many applicants you're going to get. The balance isn't quite there. You've got to be super passionate, and if you're super passionate, maybe you're not necessarily bringing the open-mindedness that you would need or that is required of the organisation. So those would be the sources, I'd say.
So I can take from that as well. Start by being very clear on what it is you need. Write up an advertisement, for want of a better word, that describes what you need, and also, as you say, what the time commitment is, what's involved in the role. Perhaps even make a video or something out there that says the same thing. But define very clearly what it is you need before you go out there and say, hey, we need somebody. So that those questions, when they arise, you've got answers for them.
And so you're not wasting people's time as well. If you're clearly looking for, I think that the obscene example I gave before, a Pacific Islands woman in her 30s who's in a wheelchair, maybe they need to meet 2 of those 4 criteria, because you really need to get those diversity factors in play for whatever reason. Maybe particular funding requirements, or maybe awareness. So, each of those roles may make up a decent proportion of your membership. So you're kind of telling people, they don't tick 2 of those 4 boxes, please don't take your time to apply. Please don't get your hopes up and put effort into putting forward your application. It's the same with recruitment for jobs. I wish actually a lot of ads were clearer as to what we're looking for, non-discriminatory, of course, within employment. That if you don't have these skill sets, you are going to be automatically screened out. Algorithms do that anyway these days. But so please don't write us a long cover letter if you really don't have a single skill set that we are looking for here. If it's 3 years experience, you really need, because we're not looking for somebody who doesn't understand this industry at all. Please don't take your time to apply. So there's that balance of getting, helping the right applicant apply, and also helping reduce the number of applicants to only those that are actually manageable in terms of that process.
Although, quite often the challenge in a smaller not-for-profit organisation is getting any applicants.
Yes, totally.
Yeah,
and that's a challenge.
When you found somebody and you bring them onto the board, what do you do to go about inducting them?
Yeah, I think a board charter is first the constitution.
Yes.
Hopefully they've seen it or they're aware of it.
Yeah.
Board charter I find very helpful in setting out kind of at a regulation level how this board operates, what our commitment to each other are, what the expected standards of integrity and practices are, how the board will interact with the chair, how the board will interact with any staff. That's actually a big one. Board members can't just go, I'm a board member, do what I say. It's like, no, not even the chair should ever do that. It's use the organisation, the CEO is the kind of the hourglass analogy. I think that somebody previously used that as well. That you do have this 1 or 2 directors, either executive directors or chief executive, who are the connection between the board. And that doesn't mean there's no connection. I'm also quite a fan of boards knowing management, or boards knowing multiple levels of the organisation, speaking to the front line. That's more in a corporate sense than necessarily in a sporting sense. But it's also not using that power to inappropriately.
Yes.
That's something I've sadly seen, and that's not ideal. What else? Access to archives, access to policies. What I would generally do also at the D&O insurance. Hopefully, at a certain level of organisation you have that, so that you give the director some comfort as to what their risk is and how their risks are mitigated. That's to say that you can be completely negligent and not care because our insurance policy will cover you, but it's giving them some insight that you've thought about these sort of things and you do or don't have one. And then a big thing I would do is a call from the chair before and after each of the first 3 meetings.
Okay.
Just to, because it's an intimidating environment often, especially if they're younger or they've got less governance experience, to walk into this room of strangers, because you don't usually have a lot of socialization time, and to sit down and be expected to contribute and expected to put forward your view. Yet that voice is important, even if that voice is short or small or naive. It is important to make them feel comfortable and part of the team. Governance is a team sport. So before and after, I've found as a way to just encourage people, allow people to
express concerns, and ask questions.
Ask the dumb question. There are no dumb questions, just things you don't know or things you haven't quite clicked yet on. That's fine, It's, so I think that induction and spending that time onboarding, a good quote I heard the other day, more about business onboarding, I guess, than governance onboarding, is make sure it's onboarding, not waterboarding. So make sure that actually it's a positive experience for the organisation that you're joining, and you're not going, what have I just got myself into here?
And there's always a bit of a risk when you're saying, here's your background reading, right?
Yeah.
Which is a big part of it. As you say, you got your constitution, you got your board charter, you'll have your last few minutes of the meetings, you got your policies, you're going to be across the stuff. So a big chunk of it is...
and context is missing a lot of it. Like you say, actually there's the 100-page document, but really you don't need to read that. Just flick over that one. It's like there's that context, and this is a thing that's been in motion. This is a key risk area. This is a key strategic focus right now. That sort of context, I think the chair can provide. Of course, all the board papers are there. You're not just taking the chair's word for it, but it is that induction, bringing on board kind of experience.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. I've got one final question for you, a little bit general. What's the best governance advice you've ever received?
Yeah, I took some time to think about this one when you sent it through. I was like, there's actually two, and it's kind of my two mottos of governance I keep going back to. And it's that board members should be learning, board members should be thinking, board members should be discussing, they should be asking, they should be directing, they should be reviewing, they shouldn't be doing. Yeah? Yeah. It's everything else, it's asking the right questions, maybe having some of the answers, but it's definitely, if you're getting your hands dirty, then you're actually not doing a governance role. That doesn't mean that you can't also get your hands dirty as part of a working group or as part of a committee, but it's not a governance role. And then sort of in the similar sort of vein, the board's job is to ask what and why, not how, not when, not where, and not who. You've got to stick to the right questions, because otherwise you get into detail that's actually operational detail about who's going to do this, when are they going to do it by, where are they going to do it, how exactly are you going to do it. So that all should be determined at most levels of organisation, management level.
And then report it up.
And then obviously report it up, maybe run it past, it's that who develops strategy. It's like, well, management should develop strategy. They're developing the strategy. Board are endorsing the strategy, board are debating the strategy, board are asking good questions about the strategy, but board are not designing the strategy, certainly not from a blank piece of paper, because otherwise, again, it depends on the level of organisation, but you're asking people who are spending minutes on something to supplement and to be more insightful than people who are spending days on something. It's like, it's disproportionate. It's a little bit obnoxious in some ways. So I think that those are the two key principles that I always come back to in boards, and that helps, especially as a chief operating officer, know where that line is, and also allowing the board to go into operational matters. I think there's also a lot of chairs that I've observed, that's operational, let's get this governance. Like, you've got to actually allow people to follow it for a little while and then bring them back.
Yes.
And so, because otherwise you're kind of shutting people down because they just happen to ask the wrong question. Or they're having to, sort of say, I'll do that, I can do that, I can call that person, I can do that, so that's fine. Just It's not what we should be doing.
And some of that can be as part of your preparation, right? You're reading your board pack and you've got those sorts of questions. Well, maybe find out the answers, and in the board meeting you can stick to the high level stuff, the what's and the whys.
Yeah, exactly. But it's coming back to those, coming back to the what and the why. Very Simon Sinek, I know, but coming back to it starts with the why.
Yeah.
Then the what, the purpose. Then why are we doing this? How does this move towards our purpose?
Yes.
And then what should we be doing? And then leave the rest kind of as so can management come back with a proposal on the what, the who, the where, and the when, and then we can build that into a plan. So,
and in a not-for-profit context, depending on the scale of the organisation, it comes down again, as you said, to the multiple hats. So when you're spending time on governance, make sure you're focusing on those big questions. And if you're then in an operating committee or a working group that's doing the do, then that's when you target the different level of question.
And there's separate meetings. I mean, those meetings may be back to back.
Yes.
7 to 8 we're dealing with the governance, the strategy. 8 till 10 we're doing the working group, answering these questions. And it may not be everybody who's on the board that's in that particular working group. You can move to subcommittee, you can move to working group, you can move to committee, level to be able to have those types of conversations. And I just think it's important to keep that separation, even if it's a large overlap of the people.
Yeah.
And that's the key distinction. Of course, holding yourself to account is a little bit tougher than holding others to account.
Yes. But it's sometimes by necessity in a not-for-profit.
Yeah, it sometimes is. Again, we're talking across a range. Not-for-profit. It's like, well, where profit isn't the sole focus.
Yeah.
The biggest mistake I've made, and I've seen in terms of a lot of social enterprises, is that they say we don't want to make a profit. I was like, well, hang on. No. You can't make losses.
Yeah.
Not-for-profit just means you're not going to distribute out to shareholders. There will be no dividend. It does not mean we will make no surplus. It does not mean we will make no sustainable activities.
There was a change in terminology that happened, I think, maybe 20 or so years ago, when you moved from non-profit to not-for-profit, as you say. That's not the main focus, but you want to make some money to be able to deliver your purpose. As you say, it's just not distributed to you.
Yeah, you have no sustainability if everything's done at break even. No. You've got to build up some reserves for the rainy day, for the unexpected. That does not mean massive reserves, but that just does mean that. So not-for-profit doesn't mean no profit. Like you said,
you've got an investment. IT systems. You might be looking into some of the
stability, longer-term thinking, something with a slightly longer payback period than this particular cycle. There are all those things that are important. So not-for-profits do need to make surpluses. They do need to invest those surpluses, often in themselves.
Yes.
Really, the only distinction is nobody's going to get paid out on this, and of course, that's when people start to get worried about pecuniary gain and about what is the director fee here. These are kind of problems for later. That's when the membership should then be calling to account and saying, well, hey, this money is for the purpose of the organisation. Let's not divert from that by starting to pay our directors or our officers huge salaries. Let's make sure that we are earning surpluses, we're ensuring our sustainability, we're ensuring that we're not overly dependent on a particular funding stream.
Yes.
That's a big one. We talk about not-for-profits and Class 4 gaming. That's a tenuous thing sometimes about community redress. It's a competitive space. So
and it can change very quickly.
Well, people fear it can change very quickly. I mean, certainly funders' appetites can change very quickly. Funders' own purposes can adjust.
Yes.
And then an organisation that's been dependent for a decade or more can suddenly find themselves out of vogue, and then
the tap gets turned off.
Yeah. So that's an interesting space.
It is, Well, Stephen, again, thank you very much for your time. It's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed this. It's a fascinating area to get into a little bit more. So thank you. I look forward to seeing you again soon and to seeing you next episode.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for watching this episode of Governance Bites. We have more episodes on YouTube and your favourite podcast channel, where I interview directors and experts on various topics relating to boards of directors and governance. We'd love to see you back, and please like, subscribe, and share the videos and podcasts.